they could just let you know if there's any issues, right? So, okay, so I'm Harry Silverstone. I've been working with Salesforce for a little while. I've worked at it as a user a long time ago. I've worked at large teams and managed large teams, corporate teams, and in the past several years, I've been working as a consultant and involved in dealing as a consultant with a number of U.S. Financial firms for the most part, but also some retail firms. Almost exclusively on Sales Cloud, but I also do some Marketing Cloud and Experience Cloud work. And what I've been finding in a lot of the work I do, because also I have a pretty strong business background, is not just the technical aspects. Salesforce is meant to help business people do business. And we're here, most of us, I enjoy technical, so I play on the keyboard, but most of us are involved in trying to help companies do more in their business easier and faster. And so I spent a lot of time in the past couple of years with automation. Flows actually fits nicely. It fits nicely because it's relatively easy as development and implementation, but it also has points in time where you can actually work easily with customers who are not as technically involved, so they can see and help you to change things, and you can change things on the fly and make things better. About what shared before?
Okay, entire screen. Should we change something, I guess? And then minimize this thing. There you go.
Okay. Yep. So a little while ago, what I was going to talk to you today is about implementing and what I put on the slide using the new Salesforce approval process flow. But that process flow now has been around for since the very beginning of the year, pretty close to it. However, I've done a couple approval opportunities for people, and this just seemed like a good time to try to see if I could do it in flow as opposed to the traditional Salesforce approval process that existed. As I go through this, I'll remember tidbits of information that come to me all the time. One of the first ones that not one of the first I encountered, but one of the first and foremost to know is that this approval process is actually built on the original approval process in Salesforce. So the whole flow, and now I can't do slides. Okay, the whole implementation of flows and the approval process flow is built on top of the original Salesforce approval environment. However, there's some things that have been added, some things that are probably not as good, and I'll try to point out things, gotchas that I found as I went along, and things that we changed a little bit. So as we go through this, we'll talk just a little bit about the approval process, some key considerations, the steps and the components that are part of it, and then really understanding what they are. Might even do a demo along the way, so I thought that might be nice. Sometimes I have a little bit of, just to keep myself normalized, I have a little bit of humor. You won't get it. I'll smile every once in a while. Everyone will be happy. You know that I said something funny, at least to me. But so with the approval process, the purpose is really to enforce business rules, right? So, people have approvals, you go and you talk to your manager, is this okay? And they say yes, and their manager calls down and says, what the, and, at least here you put it all in writing essentially, and it goes through a process, and usually that involves the upper guy actually checking a box too, so they can't speak badly anymore. It also helps to reduce errors. So you're making sure that you're doing the right things. Say you're only allowed to borrow X number of dollars, make sure you don't, exceed that next number of dollars. There's checks and balances. And, for companies that have, compliancy rules and you have checks and balances for there. A lot of different places you could apply it to. List out some, expenses, discounts, contracts. So you can use it in a lot of different places. The one that I built off of was an exception request. So if someone wanted to do something in a sales process and allow someone to pay for part of their contract later, or supply information later, or get some discount, it was all blended into the one. So definitely lots of different scenarios you can use, but you have to understand and describe the process that you want to follow, and then build around it. So when we're building this out, it actually integrates with other tools, other flows, your email, just the business tasks themselves is how the people are using it. You can make sure that you're going through a set of steps in a sequential manner. You could go through them in a parallel manner. It's really up to how you're running the business and how you're doing your effort there. And the whole idea is it's making it easier for people to get things. Like, how many times do you say, oh, I sent this to, so-and-so, and I'm still waiting to hear back. And then you go to so-and-so. I was going to make a joke there. But anyway, so-and-so says, oh, I never got it. Yeah, typical. So, but now so-and-so will have it, boom, on their desk, and it's easy to see. So, you can track things like that. Some of the things just to keep in mind as you're going through, I'm trying to go through the slides a little bit faster so that I can spend a little bit more time with the actual flow and a little bit as to how it worked. I was going to show you how I implemented something, and then we'll show you the details behind it. So you can go with dynamic approvers, so it doesn't always have to be your boss, right, that's approving something, or, the next level up. It may be under certain circumstances, can be someone else. Or if, your boss is on vacation, playing golf or something else, someone else can fill in. You could have delegates and do things like that too. And everything gets modularized. So you can have a step, an approval process where you need to do 5 or 6 different things. And each one of those can be broken out into individual components so that they can be handled in their own way. The one thing, kind of getting a little bit ahead of myself, is you'll see that, I think there's like 8 to 10 flows that I actually built. None of them are super difficult, but some of them do some very little things, like just sending an email, right? So you can have one that's just focused on sending an email for a certain circumstance, one for another circumstance, and you can get into a lot of different things. The key thing about automation that I'm encountering and with flows is you really got to know the business and what the business wants. Okay, and that's true not only with the approval, but any flow that's being built, any automation that's being built. The business and yourselves have to come to an understanding as to what it is that they really want, how they can get it done, how they need to have it done, and then how can you go about matching that. Sometimes there's a little changes, but you need to make sure that you can go through that. So you got to map the steps. You got to make sure that you're following any standards that they have, and you're supporting their goals and their desires, strategic as well as just ongoing desires. This part, I can't stress enough. And one of the customers I deal with, And I'm building a lot of flows every time they come to it. Hey, can you just do this morning? Hey, can you just change this or build this for me and have it do this? And I go, but what do you want it to do under this circumstance? What do you want it to do under that circumstance? Got to really make sure that everyone sits down and goes through and understands what it is that they want and what they need and how it has to look. So before you build, you can build little pieces, you can almost build prototypes at some points, but you really got to start by understanding the business process and the business needs. And in most cases, hey, I just went to my boss, he'd sign it, he'd send it to so-and-so, and so-and-so would, ask maybe for something. Well, what did he ask for? What did she ask for? Oh, and then they tell you what they asked for. Well, it was a pretty important piece. So you got to go through that iteration. So it's really, really important to get that and get it documented. Because the biggest thing about the documentation is you can go back to the picture. And so with this, one of the customers I work with, I often draw pictures, but we ended up having to go to Word. So they like to do things in Word, in a but with visualization, you can go back and you can say, oh, well, now we're going to do something different. Here's where the business process is going to break. Forget about the technical process or whatever. Okay. It's no different than, the car manufacturers, right? They're building cars and going down the assembly line, and now they decide they're going to use an electric motor instead of a gas motor, right? You have to make changes on that automation line, right? So, and you have to handle that. You have to know, the different types of things that go into place. It's no different here, right? Make sure you go through and you understand that business process with them. Because what I find is lots of times there are things that they didn't think of, or they start saying, 3 different people will tell you 7 different things. Now you have to align them, and you help to actually improve their process. And that process helps the company, and that's where they benefit. And then it just happens that the tool, Salesforce in this case, helps them along that path. So some of the things, in doing all that, you got to know what the entry is. This is a little bit more technically involved. What's going to start and kick off the process? Does someone, does a field change in a record? Does someone, submit a form to somewhere? A variety of different things, but those are kind of the technical criteria as to what's needed to enter into things. So you have to organize the steps, because you need to find out how many layers of approval are there needed, who's approving, what are the various situations in which you can go from one to the other, and then, well, I already said who they are. So this helps you to go through and understand things. The devil is in the details, right? What the stages or steps are in the whole process. And again, this comes back to making sure you documented the process. Who's approving it, what the order of events are that occur, because some may occur sequential, some may have feedback loops, some may occur in parallel, and you have to be able to address each and every one of those. And then you have to figure out, what do you do if you approve? What do you do if you reject the situation? What's the situation that the company expects to have happen after that? Who wants to have a customer call up and say, oh, your loan got rejected without ever being told, right? You gotta know up front. So share that. Along with that, there's some other little things, like you can get notifications like emails. You can get fields being updated. When you're making these changes, you may decide that you don't want anyone else, like if say an opportunity is in going through the approval process, you don't want anyone to touch that. So you lock the record, but you may want it so you don't lock the record. So again, all these are questions that have to come up and ask. And, basically the what if and, why do you do this are the two big questions I'm always asking people at almost every step. Even at home, I get into trouble. Why do I have to pour the milk? Okay.
This one you got.
You got the milk?
No, so,
Oh, okay. I still don't know why I pour the milk, but I take my coffee black. So, but other people in the house want milk in there. So, okay, now my joke backfired. Let's.
And how often you get situation that people doesn't want to lock a record like this is the book? Is it because I'm getting message on group, something with the details of what I'm doing, the email or calls, and then I make a decision. But if you don't lock record, somebody will change this, and then I'm approving something that I didn't agree on.
Yeah.
How often is this?
Well, so we're actually locking the records most of the times, but initially, I guess I try to call it trial and error, but it's experience. Sometimes you got to let a person see the failure. So in some cases, it's quite obvious you don't want anybody to change it. And they're adamant, yeah, it doesn't matter. So you let them change it, and then you show them, and then they say, well, yes. Yes. Actually, I usually sit there and smile. People know when I smile that I told you. But there are some circumstances where you can go through an approval process, and the things that they're changing don't matter to the actual approval. So in those cases, you can let it change. You definitely don't want to let where you can change, I'll say dollar amounts. Those are usually the ones that are, you kind of flag and say, don't touch them. So when you're going through this, or when we built this out for this particular customer, this is getting into the example that I built out not that long ago. We went through trying to understand the requirements. So they wanted a limited number of user inputs when they were doing this. So basically, they had general purpose, what they call waiver, an exemption for doing things. But what they wanted is that the users only entered in a small amount of information in order to trigger this event to occur. And we use the case object in doing this. So they wanted to state the reason, give a description, and what the related opportunity was for that event. There are three approval levels, and so supervisor, sales manager, and then the general manager. So the company has their own specific roles and people names, but this is an easier way just to describe it than from what they were doing. The approvals, were you waving at me, or you had a question, or no? Okay. That's okay. How many fingers?
I have a question.
Yes.
You just mentioned use the case object. So if this is using the underlying approval process, there are approval objects. But do they not use those?
It's not enough. The approval object is not an object that's readily available for you to modify and use. So the data is kept in other objects. So a lot of the ones that I had built before were actually on the opportunity records themselves. There were opportunity records. The approval process and components, I actually refer to them as components, even though they have fields in them, like you say, they truly are objects. They have very specific uses that you actually can't go and modify. And that presented a problem actually for me. And in fact, good timing, because 3 types of approval, the Salesforce process only allows 2, approved and rejected. There is nothing else. And so this client says, hey, I need a 3rd step. So we had to find a way to go around it. But again, it was very important in their process, right? So this is a case where it's like, hey, technically you can't do that. And they could go, okay. But it's better to go and hear them out and say, okay, so they need more. So it was approved, rejected, and then they needed more information. And the need more information was a real business component, because in their case, there was a lot of interactions with their clients, and often they would want to go back and forth and get that information. And even between the parties, they knew that they had a lot of dialogue, so they wanted to put that into the process. So an important step in the process. From the implementation, like the Salesforce implementation, there is no means of saying anything other than approved and rejected. And I'll show you how I work, or remind me if I don't, but I'll try to talk to that. But those approval components, I actually tried to go in and I worked with Salesforce a little bit on trying to modify some of them, and it was just blatant, you couldn't, because they were so far down. And that's where I kind of came across the fact that it was built, the flow process wasn't new, it was just a restructure of the existing approval process. So definitely good. It's good to know, and it's good that we're sharing information, because there's always, different nuances that each of us know that it's good. So they want the team, to be able to see the waiver and the status, right? So it's not just, hey, I submit this and it goes into the, the black hole or somewhere. They want to be able to see what's happening and what the status is. They want the owner of the request to actually get emailed, as well as to be able to see it, but be emailed whenever there's action, so that they're getting, a secondary feedback as to what's happening. And lastly, but not least, is the approvers needed to be notified of their new requests via email, and also have a means of tracking that within Salesforce itself. So,
Do you get them to be able to approve by email, right? Yes.
yes. So, just probably deviating a little bit, there's a couple different ways in which they can approve. So when when you get to the time that you're going to send out for the approval, and you let the approver know that they have a task. So there's an approval process record that's created, assigned to the approver. There's an email that's sent to them, and there's kind of a new component that's added into the approval process. It's called an approval guide. And in there, they can also approve. So there's a couple different methods, but they can approve just by saying accept or reject in the email. So a little challenge with that is, if you wanted a comment included, you can't ensure that the comment is included in the email. So it's a quirk that everyone has to live with at the moment. So.
Good. And just for everybody, if you want to use this, you need to enable this in somebody.
If to enable it in.
Email. There is a checkbox that you enable in that status for approving the email.
Yeah, so you can you can kind of turn it on in the flow, like to send, well, you turn on the flow that you want to use the Salesforce email, or you create your own email within the flow.
I'm talking about be able to do respond by email and this be processed by Salesforce.
In the very original settings, yes, yeah, yeah. Yes, yeah, and I forget about that, and actually I forgot to mention that here too. Like there's an approval process settings, we should show that screen. Okay, the big part. So I tend to use Visio for the most part. Like I said, this particular client, or one of the clients that I deal with, likes to use text, and so I actually have the full process. I narrowed this down a little bit, but I have it all fully spelled out, each step that occurs in text, and I have some Visio diagrams that I use most often. But here, so they create a waiver record, which is a case. They want to put a minimal input. Afterwards, they want to auto-populate some fields in there. So the case record gets populated with additional information. So that ends up being done by a flow. And then they need to send an email to the owner, as well as send an email to the approver. And at the same time as you're sending those, you then go into the actual approval cycle. And that approval cycle it goes, in this case, I have some typos on the slides. You can give someone a slice of pizza, I guess, if they get something right. So, yeah, so I have supervisor approver in all three boxes here, but it's the different one. So let me explain. So you go it goes to the supervisor or the sales manager, and they can either reject, say they need more information, or approve. In the case of reject or needs more information, it goes back to the originator and with the request. So the originator gets an email saying they need to, it's either just rejected or that they need more information. In the reject case, they're given some information explaining why it was rejected, where they're supposed to. If it's approved, it goes to the next level. So that blue box should really say sales manager, general manager. It should be general manager, and then the green box should be the president or whatever it was I had. So, and for each of those boxes, it's a fairly similar decision tree that occurs. So in each step, they can either reject, need more information, or approve. And then it goes on to the next step. And then just the past couple of weeks, we actually built another step, and we actually closed the whole case out afterwards. So we sent some information to the financial team, and we closed the case out. So, but I didn't think that was needed for here. So, but again, based on what this is documented, so we can build against it, and we can make sure that we're doing what's requested. And then if changes are needed, like the case where we had to close it, we can add and update the documentation. So everybody, all the sales team can see, oh yes, it's going to go from A to B to C, and it could be rejected here, or I have to do this to get more information. Okay. Approval process uses an orchestration. That orchestration, I seem to remember a long time ago, we talked a little bit about orchestrations in this group, but the approval process orchestration is not extra, it's free. It's part of the package that you get. And there are really two types of orchestrations that you can use. You can auto launch, which is driven by a button or another process, or it could be record triggered. So in the case that I'm building and demoing here today, it was done from the record triggered. So within each stage, and I'll reiterate this as we look at the flow itself, there are two basic components. There's an approval step, and then there are background steps, or a background step. And each actually can then call a flow to do other things. So approval step is really taking, those three criteria, are you approving, rejecting, or needing more information, handling that. The background steps are, let's say you approved, then you need to send that on to the next level. So now you have to change the approver. You might want to add another piece of data, so update a field, and then you have to send an email. So those are things that occur in the background. So as I mentioned, there were quite a few flows that ended up getting built in all of this. So some pre-population, the whole orchestration, and then I just call it a crap load of little things. So it can be daunting initially to do this and a little bit perplexing because you guys keep saying, oh, I got to do this. And some of these flows are almost copies of others, but you have to do them differently because, when you're saying send it to the next approval level, you have to change, who the owner is or, reference who that is, right? So if there was some dynamicism in the approval process, you could, or in the approvers, you could do that. But here it's a little bit, their structure is a little bit fixed. So you have to follow a certain pattern. All right, enough of this. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along.
So is there any specific objects for approval process? Like for flows, we'll be having content documents, like similar to that. Do we have any specific objects for this? I remember like process instance was one of those. So similarly, do we have any other objects which will involve like approvals, rejections, and all?
Yeah. So this all resides. Here you have this approval work item, that you see right here or on the screen. Sorry. So you have that. You have the approver, which I'll show you in a second. So you have some of those types of information, but most of it is actually done just directly in the object itself. Like they're initiated from the object itself, and then they're tracked through these other components. And that's what was being said earlier. Also, there are some other objects. So
if you want to do any customization, can we do on those like process work item, those objects?
no,
It can be able to do the customization.
no.
Okay.
So I'm saying it, a little bit harsh, but the problem is that there's not an easy way, even though Salesforce kind of implied and gave that, they're not allowing you access into those items. So that's where, like I'm saying, they, I didn't really bring it out here, but there's a screen where you can go into the approval and say, approve and change. It looks like you can change content because you have the flow in order to do it, but it turns out that there are fields behind it that you cannot gain access to. So you have a decision and a decision reason, and those have like an accept and a reject decision, and there's no other field. So that's the only data you can put into those guys. So this is one that's sort of in progress. So I'll just kind of show it, and then we'll just go through a brand new one. But you can see Near the top, there's a status bar that we've created so we can see the status of the approval cycle. It's actually, we've created a case record type, and then we just put everything into that record type in order to be able to track the status. But we can track the status of the progress, so any user can visually see what's going on here and where they are with that. Then there's some detailed information, excuse me, and then the approval work items and what's going on with them. So if I create a new case, and so I have this GP waiver request. This is an approval request. When I click that, you can see here there is a minimal amount of information that can be input. So I can input the there. I have a list of reasons. So again, sometimes these things like these reasons can take you probably, I don't know, a month and a half, to get everyone to agree what they are. And once you have the list, then you change it. So this is I probably have 5 different renditions of this list in about 3 months is what it amounted to. But it's a little bit of iteration, but it's also working closely with the customer to make sure it's getting it right. And they get more and more people involved, and you kind of get it right. So, and then my famous, I use test. Once I save it, so this is all I've put in as a user to say I want to start this approval process. It creates a record. The record includes up here in the input the same inputs that I put in. The subject or the name of the record is auto-populated. So behind the scenes, there's a flow that ran that populated this, and fixed up that. It looked up the actual opportunity and got the opportunity amount that existed. There's some information related to it that they get. The priority is set. Right now, we've decided just to use one priority, but then you come down into the approval, and it tells you what the status is, and it tells you who the approver is. So in the background, we've gone and looked up the approver. Over here on the side, you have the related item, and you can see that this related item is actually assigned to the same person that was listed down here. Okay. At the same time,
To find approvals, you do something like what current user, manager is approval on user record, or is it doing something?
yeah, at the moment we have a table. So we have a table that's the table for the first level is tied to the requester. So there's an approver for X number of users, but based on geography or whatever. Sorry?
It's like tier 1 user or tier 2 user.
Yeah, it's in this case it's more geographical based. So the table is more geographical. So it's a salesperson to sales manager relationship table that's been established. And so that table has flexibility, it could change, right? So, and then the second level is one of 2 people, and that is another relationship between that and the sales manager. And then the final guy is just the one person. So, at the same time, there was an email sent out, and that got sent off. And we did some modifications to the template. So the template just basically said, hey, request got submitted. So we modified the mail, and we chose not to use the template mail. You can actually override that and select and send your own email. So we we wrote our own emails.
Email body,
The email body and the flow doesn't, yes. Okay. So from here, so one tricky part in testing the flow is you got to go and see what the approver, you got to be you as the user, you as the approver, and then you want to be able to test and see each person. So I just said, okay, I'm just going to create incognito windows and log in as each of those people. You also want to be able to get their mails most times. So then you have to go and change. So what I did in the sandboxes is I just changed for the person I was testing with, I changed their user email to be my email so I could see it. So, but I have to kind of keep my head straight as to whose email I'm receiving each time. So, but for me, it was a good testing strategy because it's hard to get 3 customer people. In fact, when we did the final testing, to just get 3 client members to come and sit and test together, it was a bit of a scheduling ordeal. So one of the other issues is, so I'm logged in as one of those people, and I'm probably gonna I didn't refresh my screen. So one of the so as any user, you would see this screen, and this screen you would see this approval piece here. The one of the ideas was for the approvers to be able to do the approval on their phone. So if they look at it on a desktop, the same page I was just looking at, they see this work guide. Okay? But they see this work guide on the desktop. They cannot see it on the mobile. Salesforce limitation. Okay? And again, so there was a couple things. There was the limitation of either not being able to see this on the mobile. There was a limitation of only being able to get this approve and reject. Remember, we had 3 stages. So we put some additional text in here, and the only way I could work around it, or at least so far, is when they reject, if they really wanted to go to needs more information, they have to enter these words first. It turns out they only have to enter need. That was me being careful. But if they enter that in at the beginning of the text, I can read the comment that gets sent back, and then based on the comment, make a decision. Because they couldn't see, the list, or if they just got an email and they wouldn't know, they couldn't see the list of what their open things were, which they would have seen if they had a proper view on the mobile of this. We created a list views. So we'll come back to this in a second, but in this list views, actually, okay. So in the list views, we actually created list views so each person could see their own approvals, and then you could see approvals at each of the approval stages. So we provided both to them, but here now they can see this. If they come back to this one here, just in the interest of time, I'm just going to click the approve. Now it also turns out there was a well, there was a requirement only to have to fill out if it's rejected. So if you reject, you have to put in a comment. If you put in approve, you don't have to put in comments. So, so again, there was a little bit of tailoring to do with that. Let me just quickly show you. Should have been another email. So this is the email saying, show it here. Saying that it was submitted, it's locked up. This is a notification to Preston, and I guess I don't have the other email opened up so that I could show you. He could actually reply to his copy of the email. Let me just show you the flows because that's kind of key also.
And
So in here,
you want this to the orchestration screen?
sorry?
This flow is actually orchestration.
This flow is the orchestration. So this flow is the orchestration. So you come in here, this is record triggered, you come into here, you go through the approvals process, and basically you'll see there's an approval process, and then there's an approval and steps you take based on the approval or rejection. And then it gets a little complex, but then if you go through that stage, you go through the same set of logic again, and then you go through the next stage and you go through the same set of logic. And then here you actually go to a case where they say, okay, notify the finance team and close it out. Just come back here to this, any one of these, because they're all similar. When you go into the stage, you have, what the stage is, what you do next, and then you have the ability to add a background step and an approval step. In the background, you then call another flow, and in this case, we're calling the flow to say, what to do with, send the email. And in the, so that was the background to send the email. And in this case here, it's doing the evaluation to determine both to send the mail to the approver as well as to set the next stage. I'm getting pretty close to time, so I can show more, or if you want questions, it's up to you.
So in the standard approval process, the user can set their delegated approval in the settings, the one person settings. In this, does it use that, or do you have to build something?
So in the version that I built on the first one, that's summer 26, it didn't exist. In the winter 26, I believe it does exist. So I haven't tried to do that yet, but you could build it into the flow, and there's an extra flow step. That's how it's been described, but I haven't looked into it yet. So, and if it isn't there yet in the 26, then it's definitely in the plans.
So is it you define the delegated approval, or the user define
The flow would essentially define the delegated approver, but the approver could, I saw something, the approver could choose their own delegate. So I saw something somewhere, but I haven't delved into it to be 100% sure of what don't take me at 100% yet. So.
You mentioned, there's a limit.
You're talking pretty good.
Yeah. It's not good.
Okay.
You mentioned there's a limit on how many approvals you can have regarding your specific vehicle. Was that with the old approval process, or was that still now like You said
I-
it's concurrent.
I'm sorry, but I don't remember saying that there was a limit on the number of approvers.
You said, and maybe I misunderstood it, you said you were like, you could only have 2 approvals.
2 approval types. You could only have
The accept, reject.
the accept or reject.
Okay.
Okay, the number of approvers can be as many as you want.
Approvers, and then you. so-
Sorry, that was my bad.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, if you have a record and you, let's say, submits for approval on a dollar amount and submits for approval on something else, so can you have multiple approvals running on the same record? Maybe
Well,
different things.
so you could if you didn't lock the record, but if you lock the record, then you would be prevented from doing that. So, and I think you want to be careful when you're looking at that, that situation, to avoid that from happening.
Yes.
So you want to design your process so that you're not doing two things to one. Sorry.
Just one more question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I'm about to build an approval process for a client, and one of the things they said to me is that can they have a mass approval? So like if certain records meet certain criteria, for them to like say bulk selection on the list that needs approved. Is there any way to do that by default, or would I have to like build a custom flow for that?
Well, I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding. So you have a process that,
Let's say you have 20 records.
yes,
Generally, it's an easy approval, and maybe the reject needs additional information. Is there any way, because I see you to see the pending approvals and all that, is there any way offered in the orchestration that you could select multiple records that maybe met the criteria to approve them in one go? Because obviously when you click in, you get the flow component, the illustrator component coming up and saying approve or reject, but is there any way to do that in bulk? Maybe for this view, like a
Yeah, you can.
have to like you code that by hand.
well,
Yeah, I can answer this if you, do you have answer?
no, go ahead, because I'm not sure that you,
I have built list views for mass approvals, or bulk approvals, what you say. You put on the list view the criteria for approval kind of to be user friendly, and you build button,
Yeah.
and button is classic button for links. And then
it's a mass update.
this is mass update to the flow, and it's not documented
Yeah.
feature that you need to know about how to build it, and then you execute in the loop as many.
Passing the entire list.
You're passing IDs from this list, and then you loop over these IDs,
Yes.
and you approve or you reject all of them. But you turn on the flow has similar features. What do you want to do? You want to reject, you want to approve, you can comment, you can build additional things like he did, but it's, and there is limitation,
Yeah.
because you go to the loop and every DML is separate, you will hit DML limits, something like that, if you go more than 550.
Yeah.
It's like that, you need to have some limits there.
But you could do it you could put it in a certain type of loop to do that. Right?
Yeah.
And control that.
So, if the record is one thing instance of the record is created in the flow runs. So in that case, you need to process the once in one. I think it was asking this about processing bulk records.
You
Yeah,
can process bulk record, but
Yeah, so you remember earlier, sorry.
you need to run through the events of approval to reject or to approve. You need to have mechanism to interject in the trigger to do this.
So you remember very early on, I said you can either go record triggered or I already slipped the name of the automation, yes. And so you would use the automation one in order to run through, and that ties to the button, and then you can bring in a set of records and process them. So basically, you're still bringing in ultimately, you're bringing in a set of records, you're running them through a process in order to determine if it's meeting a criteria. If it's meeting the criteria, you stamp it and send them on their way. So you can use an approval to do that, which gives you the niceties, or you could just do it as a straight flow and still get that approval, that mass updated. So,
And one more question, like if there are multiple supervisors, the highest on the same hierarchy, there are multiple users who are the second level of approvers. So in that case, the approvers are next level of approvers.
right. So the selecting of the approver is essentially a process of itself. So you could then call another flow in, when you go to select that next level approver, and say, run a process and with whatever your criteria is, select that approver, insert that into your flow as the next level, into this flow as a next approver. That's kind of what we're doing here. Sometimes it's in the 3 levels. I have one that looks up a table. I have a second one that looks up based on one of 2 names. So it's in the field. And then the third one is just hard coded. So you can do it, a lot of different ways. Yeah, and I said you call a flow, but in fact, I just call a formula. You can call a formula to look up the table and pull out the information on the from the table. All right. I'll provide you the details. I can't provide you the flows themselves, but I can give you the what I call it, the slides, I guess, if you need them. Anything else, Nash?
You can finish. I'm trying to stop recording because I have computer died.
Oh, okay.
Any questions? Feel free to chat.
Thank you. Do I need to? I can stop the share.
I should share Two North Freedom, the Canada-wide Salesforce conference. We have set a date for next year. It's going to be May 11th to 12th. So much more accessible this year than last year. The one that just passed is in Vancouver, which is kind of hard to fly out there. But Toronto,
What date did you say?
May 11th to 12th.
Do we need to let the people here know that we're done?
Yeah, just tell them
Okay. So
we are finished. And,
for those of you who are still online, we're finished up the call. Thank you for your time, and look to meet together again next time. Thank you.
If anyone's interested in getting involved in conferences somewhere, volunteering for it, or being a speaker or anything like that, just let me know. We do have a website, the